So, hey, Steve, thank you so much for coming over here. So, in case people who are listening to this don't know, you're Steve Akanek of On Focus, Sports On Focus. And we worked together quite a few times, particularly during the football and basketball season.
Very much during football and basketball.
Absolutely. So, and I'm glad you're here because the football season's upon us. Like, opening weekend is this Friday. And quite honestly, I haven't had a chance to catch up on what's going on in the Marawood.
Yeah, it's going to be a different conference this year, different setup. A lot of things are changing from last year for sure. So a lot of things to go over there.
Yeah. So I tell you what. So like when you say there's a lot of different things, there's this thing kind of floating in the air. People are talking about like, hey, did you hear about these crossover games? There's like a new twist on them. Can you talk more about that?
So as many people remember from last year, every team in the Marawood got 3 forfeits. Because you had the 3 teams that left to play 8-player, Thorpe, Owen Withy, and Athens. Mm-hmm. WIA does not like forfeits.
And so they said never again.
They try and do the best they can. So they reshuffled the Marawood and the Central Wisconsin Small Conference, which is kind of down the Stevens Point, Wisconsin Rapids area.
Sure.
And the Marawood gets a new member, Pittsville, coming back. So those of you that were around in like the old days of the Marawood, Pittsville was in the Marawood for a long time.
Welcome back, Panthers.
Yep. And then each team will play 2 teams from the other conference. So each team will have the 2 teams from the Central Wisconsin Small. Those count as conference games, but not every team plays the same teams. So like, for example...
Super clearish.
Super clear. So like, for example... Colby has Iowa Scandinavia week 3, Loyal week 4. Those are both...
They're going to be conference games. Even though they're not conference.
Yes.
Interesting.
And for example, Edgar has Wild Rose, who is actually technically a forfeit. And I believe Rosholt, where Pittsville gets probably the top 2 teams in the conference. They get Assumption and Pacelli.
Who's hating on the Panthers? Who scheduled that thing?
From my understanding, it's random. It's just a random assignment for the first year, and then there's some stuff they can do between the conferences after that, but there isn't enough comparison between the 2 to make all that work.
Well, speaking of Pittsville, why don't we dig right into it? Let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. So let's start breaking this down. So let's start with the newcomer, Pittsville Panthers. So
last year, Pittsville was 3-7. They were 3-4 in their conference. They did get a forfeit. Almond Bancroft leaving for 8-player. They're jumping from a middle of the pack conference for small schools to probably one of the best small school conferences in the state. So it's going to be a jump in the teams they're playing, and they're losing their leading rusher and their leading receiver from last year. Oh no. So like a small group of seniors, or is it just that quality? It was just with those 2 guys. Not a huge group of seniors, but they lost some huge pieces. Aiden Kohler, he was a little short of 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. Joseph Redmond had almost 200 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. Both of them graduated. They do keep their quarterback. Waylon Grimm will be back. He had 633 yards passing, 5 TDs last year. Mm-hmm. And they keep their leading tackler, Marcus Getzinger. He had 119 tackles last year. Wow. So a big part of that, but their schedule is brutal. Uh-oh. I mean, they've got a tough schedule. Looking through stuff like that, they get Augusta week 1. Champions of the Dairyland Conference. Mm-hmm. They go to Cadott week 2, a pretty good team they're in the Lakeland, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then just that brutal schedule through the Marawood when you've got to play Colby, Abbotsford, Auburndale, Edgar. And they do that they go... And plus, like we said, they get those 2 really tough crossover games with Pacelli and Assumption. Yeah, I was to say, and on top of that. On top of that, you get the top 2 teams in the other conference as well. So really, the big game to see would be, I think, Abbotsford and Marathon are going to be the ones to keep an eye on, just simply because Marathon, we'll talk about them soon. They've had a rough couple of years. Abbotsford's hard to judge, so it'll be interesting to see how Pittsville plays. So So you're saying like between those 2 games, Pittsville would probably be like kind of like a sleeper coming in there and shock them. Those are the 2 that I think in conference they have the best chance of winning. I gotcha. And that's not saying they're going to, because honestly, I don't think they win a conference game this year. But if they're going to win one, I think week 8 at home against Marathon is probably their best chance.
Well, there you go, Panther Nation. Circle those dates. That's the games you definitely don't want to miss. So now you were just mentioning the Red Raiders Marathon, that great, beautiful stadium they have over there. Why don't you move on to them next?
Marathon almost lucked their way into a playoff spot, just due to the fact that they got the 3 forfeits in conference. I mean, they were the only team from the Marawood not to make the playoffs last year. But there again, they lose their quarterback, they lose their top receiver, and they lose their top tackler from last year's team.
Oh, jeez.
They do have a relatively easy, in the crossover level, so they're going to have an opportunity to rack up some conference wins there. But really the games, again, when they go to Pittsville, that's going to be a big one for them. Mm-hmm. And then obviously week 9, there's always the rivalry game with Edgar.
Now, why is that a rivalry? Oh, from other sports too?
Or other sports. I mean, they're founding members of the Marawood. They're not that far away. And while Stratford may be the bigger rival for Edgar, there is definitely a bit of a rivalry there with Marathon, especially more in the basketball side. They both have been pretty good the last few years in basketball. So, but it's always, it's one of those games you just can't look past.
Absolutely. Is that in Edgar or in Marathon?
That is in Edgar, though.
Ooh.
So, and Edgar is just one of those places that's tough to win a game.
The kitty cat house.
Yes.
Or whatever I don't know what they call it. So now let's talk about I've been hearing Abbotsford a few times from you. Why don't you talk about them quick?
So Abbotsford, they finished middle of the road in the conference last year. They had, they forfeited the game to Colby due to some illness last year, and then they had that tough loss in Auburndale in a game that I think most Abbotsford fans said they should have won.
It snuck away from them.
But, looking at them from this year, they're losing some big guys on the defense. 4 of their top 5 tacklers graduated, and they're losing their main running back on the offensive side, Ty Faltasek.
That one's gonna hurt. He was an overall big athlete. Yep.
But you are bringing back probably the fastest, I would put money down as the fastest guy in the conference in JV Castillo.
Wow.
He is speedy. Watching him on the baseball field a little bit this year, and he's fast. Mm-hmm. Evan Reese is a good athlete. He's probably the guy I think is going to step into that running back role. They keep their receivers. Not that they're a team that throws the ball a lot, but when they do, they go deep, and they've got 2 big guys that can go deep. So they should be okay. I'm just not 100% sure how they match up with the Colbys and the Edgars and the Auburndales.
I gotcha. Do you think they keep their bunch offense?
I think they keep the bunch offense, but, forever the Abbotsford offense has been run the ball, and then all of a sudden that big tight end just streaks down the field and you just chuck it up and
wide open.
It. And he's wide open because you don't have anybody. In order to stop the running offense, you got to keep everybody
absolutely
right up on the line, and that guy gets behind there, he's gone.
Absolutely. Well, so you're mentioning 2 teams I want to get to, but let's not forget about the Road Warrior team from the playoffs, Auburndale, the Screaming Eagles. Well, not Screaming, but the Eagles.
Auburndale, honestly, Auburndale's going to be good. I mean, we're talking about a team that they had 2 conference losses this year. That was Colby and Edgar. Mm-hmm. 2 top teams in the state last year. And they're only lost 4 players.
Ooh, you know what that means.
No, they lost a big piece. A couple big pieces are in that 4. Terrence Cottrell Roberson.
Their big running back.
Yeah, 697 yards and 10 touchdowns in 9 games. He only played 9 games last year. I was going to say, he was
a big-time player.
One of their leading tacklers, Jesse Fowler, he had 71 tackles last year. He graduated. But we'll go through the list returning. Trayton Weber, the quarterback. 1,294 yards passing, 12 TDs, 851 yards rushing.
Yeah, he's got a good arm.
Evan Scholl, their leading receivers, Evan Scholl and Timothy Schmidt, their 2 leading receivers, are back. Alex Wilford, another big-time receiving guy. And then their leading tacklers, back too. I mean, they've got pretty much everything back except that big speed running back that they had with Roberson. But honestly, I see them doing some really good stuff with that.
Absolutely.
And that was a team that throws out a unique offense. It's a college-style spread, read option. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of movement.
It's not the prototypical high school offense. You're right. It's very like, when you're sitting down on a Saturday, Sunday game, you're like, this looks really familiar to me.
So, and they are they are the team that benefits from the forfeit. They were supposed to play Wild Rose. So, but they picked up Hurley, who is perennially a very good team.
I was to say, they're don't let the town fool you. That's a great football program.
But they are coming to Auburndale.
Now, there is an interesting dynamic to that.
Yeah, that's a long trip. And then their end of their season is brutal.
Auburndale's?
They host Edgar in week 8, and they go to Colby in week 9.
That's like last year, though. They played us late.
Yep, they played late, but that was a team that got underseeded because they played such a tough schedule in the conference. And,
I remember that being a big talking point.
They went to Necedah, won big, went to Marquezan, won big, and then obviously ran into the eventual state champion Colby and got beat up a little bit in that one. I mean, Colby won pretty big, but nobody in Division 6 was beating that Colby team last year.
No.
Other game to keep an eye on, and I don't have it written down here. I believe it's week 5 or 6. They go to Pittsville. We talked about Pittsville not having some, maybe being a bit down this year. That is one of those rivalry games that you never know what is going to happen in.
Really?
Those are two teams that really, and it's nice to see it back in the conference, but they have battled against each other for years. They're kind of the two rural small schools in Wood County. Mm-hmm. Everything else is either Rapids or Marshfield. So they really butt heads there and did the game last year, and Pittsville scored 28 unanswered to make it close.
Wow.
So they will play. They will get the best of Pittsville.
Yeah, that's going to be mid-September.
Yeah, mid-September. So that's going to be a game to keep an eye on.
Yeah, at Pittsville. So mark that calendar on September 16th. Now, you were mentioning the Hornets. Yep. So let's ride that wave. Your 2021 Division 6 state champions. And you're right. Talking about that Auburndale game, calling that game, well, all of us were kind of nervous, especially that first quarter going into halftime. We're just like, you almost wonder, is this going to be the chin music? But then, we came out of halftime and we didn't look back. But anyway, take it away.
Colby, obviously we're going to talk about the big 3 players graduating for sure.
Jeske.
But, 16 guys are graduating. Pretty much, a big chunk of the O-line from...
It's pretty much a whole entire team is gone.
Yeah, pretty much. You're looking at, you have 16 guys graduating. If most guys play 2 ways, so you're really looking 12, 13 starters. Not all of them were starters, obviously, but, you're losing Brent, you're losing the Jeskes. Brody Decker, Brandon Volker, Tristan Stang, a lot of pieces there. Mason Voss. You're losing a lot of that offense, and you wonder how much of that they're going to have back. But there are some people we get to talk to that are still around. Tucker Meyer. If you didn't go to a Colby JV game, he was chucking that ball all over the field.
Really,
really good passer. I think. Very different style of quarterback from Brent Jeske. Brent Jeske was a running back that played quarterback and could throw. Tucker Meyer is more your prototypical drop back, throw the ball downfield kind of passer. So I think he brings a different element to the offense than Brent Jeske did. And then obviously on the outside, he's going to have some weapons. Caden Healy, Mateo Lopez. I know you talked about Tevin Rue, who made some big plays defensively. I think he'll probably have a bigger role in the offense, and probably some guys that we're not familiar with that are going to step up. But
Gavin Voss
is another one. Yep. So I think the offense is going to look different from what we saw last year. It's still going to be the Colby offense.
I was to say, looking different in what way?
I haven't talked to Coach Hagan about this, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I think we're going to see more passing out of Colby.
Hot take.
Just because you have a weapon like Tucker Meyer that can throw the ball like that. Watching the JV games, it was NFL like sometimes where he would just take the snap, drop back, throw. It wasn't, where I think we'll see a little more of that. I think it's still going to be Colby football. You have the good running backs, obviously Mateo Lopez, Caden Healy, both of whom, are good running backs and have speed. Mateo Lopez, both of them are just freak athletes on top of being good football players. But I do think you're going to see a little more passing out of Colby this year.
Which would be like a pretty interesting look, because I know we've had that conversation. It's like if you have a really powerful passing game, you got a really great great high school team.
Yes. If you ever want to look at how well it can work, all you have to do is look at the Mosinee Indians. I think there's some things they might be able to pull from Mosinee. Now, I don't think they're going to go full Mosinee and go 4 wide and chuck it every play. I don't think we're going to see that. But that was a team that threw the ball a lot, and there aren't many high school football teams that can cover 4 receivers in a route. So I think there's some things that they can take from that and maybe use Tucker Meyer's skill set to a level there.
Should be an exciting season, right?
Should be.
So now,
just a couple.
Sure, absolutely.
Games. Obviously, week 2, the rivalry game with Spencer. That's always a fun one. Obviously, last time Colby went to Spencer was double overtime.
Yeah, so that was like 2 years ago. That was a magical game, double overtime, and not to talk about that game too much, but what made that special was for a while Spencer had a powerhouse team. Didn't really get a lot. I think they had a state title run, but they could have went to a few more. But they had some big time players
Yep.
And Colby would just get beat up, and then it was kind of like, well, the Kings of the Clover Belt are gone. Here come the Spencer Rockets. But then we had that game, and we went toe to toe with them, but we scraped out a win. And it felt like that was Jim Hagan, that up until the playoff run and the state championship, that was probably his biggest win.
For sure. So, obviously going back there, that's going to be a big one.
A lot of emotions will ride, especially on that Spencer squad, yeah.
Then week 3, going to Iola Scandinavia. That is a tough place to play. For those of you that are not familiar, the high school's in Iola, but the football field's in Scandinavia. So there's no locker rooms. There's very little locker room. It's just a field in a...
What are they supposed to do?
It's just, that's the way it works.
You change in one porta potty and it's one at a time?
I think there's small locker rooms there, but it's not like at Colby where you're at the high school and there's, the school locker rooms right there and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different environment. They've got history, obviously. They've got a couple state title runs recently. They've been down a little bit, but they look to be back up this year. And then the other 2, week 5, at Edgar. Edgar has a chip on their shoulder.
Everybody's got that date circled. As soon as the schedule came up, I can almost guarantee you that Edgar has been itching.
Yep.
For this.
They've got week 2 circled with Stratford, and then they've got, and we'll talk about that one. Then they got week 5 circled with Colby.
Yeah, and that's going to be a tough environment indeed.
And then for the first time, we get the milk can game in Colby.
Yeah.
Not in the playoffs. Abbotsford comes to Colby week 8, rivalry week, what's turned into rivalry weekend in football.
Yeah.
So that'll be week 8. Honestly, I think it's going to be a battle between Colby and the next team we're going to talk about. The conference title game is probably week 5. Whoever wins that Edgar-Colby matchup probably wins the conference.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay.
Auburndale might make a run if they can, if they put a good offense together and they get on a roll, they might make a run at it. But really, I think it's going to be Colby or Edgar. So speaking of,
I was to say. So speaking of, I would love to talk more about the milk can game, but we'll have plenty of time to do that. But why don't you, last on our list, the Wildcats, Edgar.
Edgar, they lone conference loss last year was at Colby. They lost 4 overall, including
womp
the playoffs. They're graduating 11, but big pieces returning. They lose their quarterback, they lose a good receiver / runner, they lose a good tackler, but Carter Butt's back. 1,000 yards rushing.
Hard to tackle that kid.
And it's Edgar. Edgar's going to have football players. It's never a question of if they're going to have a good football team. It's a question of how good they're going to be. Jerry Sins has been at it forever, and he just constantly puts out good teams.
How old is he now? 147 years old? Or
he's up there. He's definitely up there.
He's a nice guy. In case he's listening, hi.
He's a nice guy. He's been there forever. I think he's 3rd in the state in wins.
3rd? Wow.
He's 3rd in I'm going to look that up to be sure.
But yeah, looking at their schedule, and even looking at their schedule, it's like you said, Edgar just has that program, and it's been working well for them. and they're always going to be. It doesn't matter how far they're going to travel; they're going to be the team to beat.
Actually, I'm going to correct myself. He's second in the state.
Oh boy, here we go.
Only behind Bob Highland of St. Mary Springs.
How funny! We know those guys.
So yeah. So I mean, but at the same time, they do have to they do have to find the right players and stuff, and they are replacing a lot. I mean, let's be honest, Carter Butt's going to keep them, even if they don't quite have the same pieces. Carter Butt's going to keep them in a lot of games. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is just, he's a amazing running back. He's young. I believe he's finally going to be a senior. But he's
and it's the endurance of that kid too. During that Colby game, most running backs got wore out against that front that we had, especially by the fourth quarter. Everybody was gassed. That kid, he would just come running back out like he just got done with the first quarter. Like, he has just got a motor on him.
And that's one thing that's been absolutely the hallmark, more than anything else, of Edgar football is those kids are well conditioned. They know how to play 4 quarters because they've had to play. They play a lot of tough games. Mm-hmm. Obviously they get the early test against Stratford. That's week 2. That's always a huge one. That was a 9-8 game last year.
Where is that? In Stratford?
That is in
Edgar. Oh, wow.
Last year was the one where they got rained out and they ended up having to play that game at DC Everest.
Yeah.
Stratford side, so that game's in Edgar. It was going to be actually, no matter what the scheduling, it was going to be in Edgar because Stratford doesn't have a home field this year.
Why?
They're putting turf down and it's not going to be ready in time. So they're planning away games. Week 5, they get Colby at home. Mm-hmm. Week 6, they go to Abbotsford. Then week 8, they go to Auburndale. I mean, those are going to be the ones to keep an eye on. That at Auburndale game will be the interesting one.
I was going to say, could they sleep on that one a little bit, maybe?
I don't think they'll sleep on it because after that, I mean, those are their 3 big ones. I think they get 5, 6. Week 7 is Pittsville. Week 9 is Marathon. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have that, those 2 games around that one. But in Auburndale, that's always a weird place to, Auburndale can be a little bit of a weird place to play. It's a small field, so there's going to be a lot of people on the sidelines for that one, I'm guessing. So, I mean, it's going to have a bit of atmosphere to it, especially because if Edgar beats Colby week 5, they would most likely all but clinch the conference title. They could clinch the conference title week 8.
Wow.
So, whereas if Colby beats Edgar week 5, they could all but clinch the conference title week 8 against Abbotsford. So those week 8 games, depending on who wins that Colby-Edgar matchup, are going to be
crucial,
huge one way or the other.
I gotcha.
I mean, obviously, Colby-Abbotsford is going to be huge for a whole nother reason. Even if they were both 0-7 going into that game, that's going to be a huge game no matter what.
Yep, yeah.
But I mean, that extra juice of possibly having, in my projection, at least one of those 2 teams could clinch the conference title that night.
Wow.
So, I mean,
gives you the chills to think about that. Yeah,
it does. But, honestly, I think you're looking, like I said, I think we're looking Colby, Edgar are probably the 2 top favorites, 1A, 1B in the conference, depending on how things shake out. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot to learn on both of those teams. They're replacing a lot of pieces. So we're some of that is on history of them both being very good programs, but we'll see where they end up. I would not be shocked to see Auburndale make a run. I think.
Me neither. There's just a gut feeling I have about Auburndale. So we're well past the time mark that you were telling me about. So do you want me to ask you? I was going to ask you 3 quick questions, or
sure.
do you want to just?
Yep.
Or is this something you want to re-record to see if you can get under that time minute?
We're good.
Okay, so we're talking about these teams. We're talking about projections. You're talking like week 8 is going to be crucial depending on what happens in week 4 or 5. So who is going to be the biggest player that stands out in your mind, like big time player?
I think it's going to be Carter Butt for Edgar.
Carter Butt.
If he improves on the season he had last year, I don't think Edgar can lose.
Even if a team stacks a box on him?
I just think there's so many moving pieces in that Edgar offense, and if Carter Butt has the season he had, I'm not saying they can't, but I just don't see a clear loss in their schedule.
Do you think he's top 10 rusher in the state?
I don't know if he does that just because of the way that Edgar spreads the ball around. I don't think they're going to have that big top rusher like that.
Not like a Durand or
Not like a Durand where you got Bauer, or even like Colby with how much Jeske ran last year.
Yeah.
Their offense doesn't produce those kind of guys. They produce wins. But
Good point.
But if Carter Butt does advance like you would expect him to do year to year, I think that's going to be a really hard offense to stop.
Absolutely.
And he may not have the numbers because everybody's going to load up against Carter Butt.
Yeah.
But there's going to be nobody on the outside when they play fake to him and toss it or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's going to really, like, everybody hyper-focusing on him, that's going to open up a lot of opportunity. And then, we'll all just flare him out one then.
Yep,
give him
absolutely.
open space. What is going to be, what's your hot take? It could be a narrative. It can be a game. It can be a team. What is something where you're like, I'm going to say this and break the internet?
I think that this would be my hot take.
Yep.
The Marawood goes 10-2 against the Central Wisconsin in the crossovers.
Whoa!
Honestly, I think
I gotta write that one down.
I just think that the Marawood top to bottom is a better it's just a more stacked conference.
Wow.
And the way the games
Regionally or statewide?
Statewide.
No kidding. Saying I'm not surprised.
My
but
other hot take would be I think the Marawood might be the best small school conference in the state this year.
Nice.
Because I think really you have 4 top level teams in this conference. You have probably 2 deep playoff run teams in Edgar and Colby. You have 2 teams that should easily make a level 2, level 3 game in Auburndale and Abbotsford. In fact, if the pairings come out right and they're not in the same group, I could see either Auburndale or Abbotsford making a deep run themselves. My only fear there is they're going to run into Colby at some point. If they're all in the same group like they were last year.
I was going to say, it'd be kind of neat to see, like, I remember when it was like, it was the Clover Bell and Abby got all the way, and then we called that game in Regis. That was a lot of fun.
It was. And there's one, and there too, you look, Auburndale lost to Colby, Abbotsford lost to Colby in the playoffs. Edgar was the only team not to lose to a Marawood team, and that's only because they were D7. Had they been in D6, that probably would have been another Colby-Edgar matchup.
That would have been crazy.
So I think absolutely this is a conference that's got 4 very good teams. I could be wrong on Marathon and Pittsville. I could definitely see them being good. I just think that just due to the fact that they have to play the schedules they play, it's really tough for them.
It's a tough
road for them.
Who is going to be your breakout player or team? Like, there's subtle rumblings about him, but then you think that this person or team is going to be out on the scene.
It's hard to say considering he threw for almost 1,300 yards and ran for 850. But I think Trayton Weber's going to be even better this year.
That's what I was going to say too, because he was a solid player, but like you were saying before, like it kind of got drowned out with, look how well Colby's doing, or like, look at the running game of Abbotsford, and everybody kind of forgot about him. But I'm like, that kid's special, and that's who I was thinking too. And
especially being they're losing Terrence Cottrell Roberson, they're going to need...
They're going to focus on him more.
They're going to need a little more running up. Probably need a little more running out of him. I mean, they have Evan Scholl, who did a good job, 461 yards last year filling in. But I think you're going to need a little more from Trayton Weber. And I think he has a very good year this year. And I honestly think for Auburndale, if he has as good a year as I think he's going to have, they're going to have a good year.
Absolutely. Those were my top 3 questions for you. Unless you wanted me to ask you like one more, or you wanted to make one more comment.
Nope, you can ask one more.
I can ask one more.
Yep.
Who do you think is going to be? The top coach of the Marawood? Not just based on wins, but who do you think is going to be? You know what I mean? Like, who's going to be your coach of the Marawood?
Honestly, with the way the voting goes, I think it's going to be whoever wins the Colby Edgar game.
It just hits right back to that.
Everything. In the way I'm looking at the conference right now, I think everything comes down to that game. Now, I will say that if Abbotsford or Auburndale do make a push and if they jump into second or jump into first, I think there's your coach of the year no matter what.
I see.
If Jay Anderson or Nat Miller are able to get the team and jump over one of the Colby Edgars, I think they're your coach of the year.
I gotcha. Well, okay, so I know I told you that was going to be my last question. I'm sorry. You got my brain thinking here. Let's see if you can answer this one. Well, maybe you just did. What's going to be your game of the season? Like, everybody should say, like, circle this one. Don't miss it.
I mean, it's no doubt it's Colby and Edgar.
Okay, they're right.
Colby, I mean, that is going to be, with the structure of the Marawood, assuming everything stays the way it is, I have a feeling that's going to, it never will be Edgar Stratford, and it never will be Abbotsford Colby in terms of the rivalry, but in terms of being what's probably going to be most years the best two teams in the conference facing off, that is going to be the best in-conference game that either of those teams have all year, most likely, in most years.
What kind of NFL rivalry would you compare that to?
I would compare it maybe to the Colts-Patriots rivalry from back when it was Manning versus Brady. They're neither of them, that wasn't their top rival, like, historically. But for those years when they were both so good, that was just one of those circle games.
They'd always run into each other.
Always run into each other. And it's one of those games you circle because you knew it was going to be a good game.
Yeah. I was to say Packers and 49ers. 49ers, Packers roll in and are like, we got this. 49ers sneak out a win. And it's been bitter ever since.
The only thing I would say there is that I think Patriots, Colts, they were both such good teams.
Yes.
Whereas the Packers, the 49ers just seem to have the Packers number.
I know. What would be how do I phrase this? What is going to be a big rivalry game that people should say, like, dude, maybe we should check that one out?
One that's going to be off the radar, we talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, off the radar game. That's what I wanted to say. Off the radar game. Yeah.
Auburndale, Pittsville.
Okay.
You know, that was one when Pittsville moved out of the Marawood and into the central Wisconsin. That was the one game that they made sure still happened. They used to play it week 1.
Really?
When it was non-conference. Mm-hmm. That was their first game, and there's stories I can't tell because it's, you know, just things that have happened in that rivalry that on, you know, off
that you can't tell?
Off-field stuff that has happened. But let's just say that it's two schools that
hate each other.
I wouldn't say hate each other. There is a begrudging acceptance.
begrudging
acceptance that they're the two rural Wood County schools, and they both think they're the better one, and they play against each other in everything, even with them being in separate conferences now. You know, that one kind of started brewing in the Marawood back in the days when it was, you know, Stratford, Edgar, Auburndale, Pittsville were the 4 that really competed. And since then, even with the conference split, they pretty much play in every sport still. And the kids know each other, you know, they're all in the same stuff. So it's not a Stratford Edgar hatred rivalry where both communities just absolutely despise each other that week. It's more of all right, we're the two rivals. We're going to have some fun. We're going to do some things that we probably shouldn't during the week. I don't remember which school it was, but I know one gets out about 15 minutes earlier than the other. So all the football players hopped in their cars and drove to the other one to harass the football kids as they were getting out of school and stuff like that. So there's stuff that happens there, but it's not necessarily like an antagonistic rivalry like a Stratford Edgar.
Sure.
Or a Medford Mosinee or a Spash Rapids. It's more of a friendly-ish rivalry, but there's still a lot of headbutting. But that game always seems to produce something weird.
Interesting.
You know, you had the 28 unanswered by Pittsville to make it close last year. A couple years ago, they went double overtime. You know, there's always something.
I vaguely remember that. I think we were on a call together and you were flipping out. Or you were mentioning that game, and then I was just like, what?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, there's always something in that game, and it's definitely a game you throw the records out because both teams have that game circled on their calendars.
Absolutely. Well, is there any last thoughts that you want to file out? I answered all my questions, and I feel like I'm ready for the football season now.
Yeah, we're in Colby. I know you're on You're not.
So let's break that news. I will. I'm not going to be. It's going to be the first game I miss for announcing since 2018 when I started. But yeah, I will not be there for the first home game.
Yep. So, but we will be there. We will have a live stream of that game,
which is going to be nice because then I can watch it from afar.
And if I'm remembering my schedule right, I think we have 7 Colby games on the schedule this year.
Oh, excellent.
So we're going to have a lot of fun with Colby. So make sure to check that out. That's going to be your main sort. We're going to be around for a lot of the Colby games.
Yeah, and then that's always been nice. I'm always appreciative that I was able to have been able to work with you guys. You do a fantastic job, great commentary, and you basically give. Oh, hi. This is my kid. You basically give our school so much. You give our school so much. Okay, goodbye. There we go. But no, that's been the nice thing about working with On Focus, especially, and I always love it when you come to follow our games or come to the home games because you give us such great outreach, and then there's so much Hornet Nation fandom that pour in and say I am so glad I get to watch this, and I love the commentary. I love the flow of what On Focus does to organize these, especially up to the game, and then the interviews afterwards. So I'm glad that you will be hooking up again.
Oh yeah, we're excited. It's going to be a good look at what Colby is this year against against a team that another one of those old rivals. So Neillsville Granton. So.
And that's the thing is just that's been in the annuals, and we've been running into each other ever since. And yeah, I mean, it's an appropriate inaugural game of let's start the Marawood.
Yep.
It's a very appropriate game.
So we'll be there on Friday. Actually, in fact, there's some games coming up on the date. This will be released Thursday. Some games coming up that night if you want to get out to them. So
on Thursday?
There's some Thursday night games this year. Marshfield plays Thursday night.
Against who?
They play Hudson.
Oh. So
that should be an interesting matchup. We'll have highlights of that one. So
who's going to edge on that one?
No clue.
I was going to say they're both the same size school or cities too. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hudson's a much bigger school district now, so they're getting all that wash over across the border from the cities. So
nice.
But there's some Thursday games. There's a lot of Thursday games, a lot of Saturday games this year. So we're gonna get some. There's gonna be possibly some weekends where you get 3-4 football games in a weekend.
There's no way people will get footballed out though.
No. Because you got to consider we have 9 weeks and 2 days to bracket release for playoffs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, football season goes fast, so make sure to get out. If you can't get out, obviously, like I said, we'll have, I believe, 6 or 7 of the Colby games on this year. So
yeah, and you guys are really easy to stream. You're easy to find through social media on your website. Really easy to not just log in, just click and watch and enjoy.
Absolutely.
All right, well, hey, Steve, thanks for coming in here and chatting with us, and let's have a good season, huh?
Yep, we're ready for football. Make sure to tune in Friday.
There you go.